The text message arrived during my daughter's piano recital. Your husband is at the Riverside Inn. Room 247. Thought you should know. I sat frozen in the auditorium chair, watching Emma's small fingers dance across the keys, while my world collapsed silently around me. 10 years of marriage, a 7-year-old daughter, a mortgage, we'd refinanced twice. And now this, an anonymous text that confirmed what I'd been trying not to see for months. My name is Claire Patterson, and I'm a UX designer for a mid-sized tech company in suburban Chicago. I work from home 3 days a week, which means I notice things, like how my husband Jake started showering before coming home instead of after his gym sessions, how his phone became permanently face down on every surface, how late meetings multiplied like rabbits while his actual work calendar remained suspiciously light. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, or rather, to the moment everything ended. Emma finished her piece to scattered applause. She looked directly at me, beaming with that gap-toothed smile that made my heart contract. I forced myself to clap, to smile back, to look like a mother whose entire existence hadn't just shifted off its axis. Jake's seat beside me remained empty. He'd promised to be here. Promised Emma he wouldn't miss this one, not after skipping her last 3 school events. The empty chair felt like a monument to every broken promise, every half-truth, every time I'd swallowed my suspicions, because confronting them seemed harder than living with doubt. After the recital, I buckled Emma into her booster seat and drove us to her favorite ice cream place. She chatted about the performance, about how she'd only made one tiny mistake in measure 43 that probably nobody noticed. I made the appropriate responses while my mind calculated distances and timing. The Riverside Inn was 20 minutes from Emma's school. Jake's office was 10 minutes in the opposite direction. He'd left work at 4:30, according to the location sharing we'd set up years ago, back when it seemed like a practical safety measure, not a surveillance tool. I'd stopped checking his location months ago, telling myself it was because I trusted him. Really, it was because I was afraid of what I'd find. "Mom, you're not listening," Emma said, strawberry ice cream smeared across her chin. "Sorry, sweetie." "What did you say?" "I said Mrs. Henderson wants to enter me in the regional competition, but it's the same weekend as Aunt Nicole's wedding." Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Aunt Nicole, Jake's sister, the woman who'd looked at me with barely concealed contempt since the day we met, who'd told Jake at our rehearsal dinner that he was settling, who'd spent a decade finding subtle ways to remind me that I wasn't quite good enough for their precious family legacy. "We'll figure it out," I told Emma, wiping her face with a napkin. But I was already thinking about Nicole's wedding, 3 months away, the family gathering where everyone would smile and pretend and perform, where I was expected to play my role as Jake's devoted wife while I needed to know for certain. The text could be a mistake, a cruel prank, a misunderstanding, except it wasn't. Deep in my bones, I knew it wasn't. I dropped Emma at my mother's house, claiming I had to run back to the office for an urgent client call. Mom didn't question it. She never questioned anything, had spent 40 years not questioning my father's business trips until he left her for his secretary 3 days after their anniversary. The Riverside Inn squatted beside the highway like a guilty conscience, 2 stories of beige siding and fake shutters, the kind of place that existed solely for people who needed somewhere cheap and anonymous. I parked at the edge of the lot where my car blended with the shadows. Room 247 was on the 2nd floor, exterior entrance. A silver Lexus sat directly in front of the stairs. Not Jake's car. He drove a practical Honda CR-V, but I recognized it anyway. Vanity plate, Hannah Kay, Hannah Kendrick, Jake's co-worker, the brilliant new marketing director he'd mentioned approximately 7,000 times in the past 6 months. She's so creative. She really gets our brand vision. She's taking the department in exciting new directions. I'd met her exactly once, at the company holiday party. She'd worn a dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget and smiled at me with teeth so white they probably glowed in the dark. When she shook my hand, her grip was brief and dismissive, the kind that said, "I'm just being polite because someone's watching." Jake had been promoted to senior account manager 2 weeks after Hannah joined the company. Coincidence, he'd said, recognition of his hard work, nothing to do with the new director who thought he was exceptionally talented. I sat in my car for 20 minutes watching that door. Room 247. Second floor, third from the end. The curtains were drawn, but light leaked around the edges. What was I doing here? What did I expect to accomplish? The smart move was to drive away, call a lawyer in the morning, start protecting myself and Emma before Jake knew I knew. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the need to see it with my own eyes, to transform suspicion into certainty. My phone buzzed. "Jake. Meeting running late, don't wait up." The audacity of that text ignited something in me. I got out of the car. The stairs creaked under my feet. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. Traffic hummed on the highway. Normal sounds in a normal world where normal people did normal things. I reached room 247 and stood there, hand raised to knock, heart hammering against my ribs. Then I heard her laugh. Hannah's laugh, high and bright and unmistakable. Followed by Jake's voice, lower, saying something I couldn't make out. Another laugh. I didn't knock. I turned and walked back to my car, got in, and drove home. Some people might call that cowardice. I call it strategy. Because in that moment, standing outside that motel room, I realized something important. I didn't need to catch them in the act. I needed to be smart, calculated, patient. Jake thought I was the same woman he'd married 10 years ago, accommodating, trusting, eager to believe the best in people. He didn't know that I'd spent those 10 years building websites, creating user experiences, learning how to anticipate behavior and design systems. He didn't know that my job had taught me to think in flowcharts and decision trees, to map out every possible path from point A to point B. He certainly didn't know that I'd been quietly documenting every irregularity for the past 2 months, not because I was planning anything, just because something in me said, keep records, save the receipts. Now I knew why that instinct had kicked in. I didn't confront Jake that night. When he came home at 11:30, smelling of hotel soap and Hannah's perfume, I pretended to be asleep. He kissed my forehead, actually had the nerve to kiss my forehead, and whispered, "Sorry I missed the recital, babe. Tomorrow I'll make it up to Emma." Tomorrow came and went. So did the promised make-up time. Instead, I spent my days working and my evenings building a case. Not for court, not yet, but for my own understanding. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I made any moves. I started with the obvious, phone records. Our family plan gave me access to detailed billing. Jake had been texting one number with obsessive frequency, hundreds of messages per month starting in February. That number belonged to Hannah Kendrick. Then came the credit cards. Jake handled our finances, or so I'd thought. Turns out he'd opened 2 cards I didn't know about. The statements came to his office, but I found the accounts through our credit monitoring service. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotels in cities where Jake supposedly had solo business trips. Jewelry purchases in amounts that made my stomach turn. I certainly hadn't received any jewelry. The company calendar was trickier. Jake's work account was password protected, but he'd made the classic mistake of using the same password for everything. Emma's birthday, plus the year we got married. His calendar showed a fascinating pattern. Every late meeting corresponded with a gap in Hannah's calendar. Every business trip overlapped with her travel schedule. I created a spreadsheet, dates, times, locations, expenses. I backed everything up to 3 separate cloud services Jake didn't know I had. I took screenshots, saved PDFs, built an evidence trail that would survive any attempt to delete or deny. This was my job, essentially. I created user flows, anticipated problems, built systems that worked even when people behaved unpredictably. Now I was applying those same skills to my marriage, or rather, to ending my marriage, because that was the decision I'd made, sitting in my home office at 2 a.m, surrounded by bank statements and phone records. I wasn't going to try to fix this. I wasn't going to couples therapy or giving him a chance to explain or any of that nonsense you see in movies. Jake had made his choice. Now I'd make mine. But I'd do it right. Emma asked about her father at breakfast. "Is Daddy sick? He's been sleeping on the couch a lot." Jake had been sleeping on the couch because I'd locked our bedroom door and told him I had a deadline and needed uninterrupted sleep. He'd accepted this without question, which told me everything about how little attention he paid to my actual work schedule. "Daddy's just busy with work," I said, pouring her cereal. "Is he coming to Parent Day at school?" "We'll see, honey." She looked at me with those serious brown eyes, too perceptive for 7. "You're sad, Mom." I hugged her, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. "I'm okay, baby. I promise." That was a lie. I wasn't okay. I was furious and heartbroken and terrified about what came next. But I was also determined. And determination, I was learning, could carry you through anything. I called my friend Rachel that afternoon. We'd met in college, stayed close through careers and marriages and kids. She was a family law attorney now, partner at a firm downtown. "I need advice," I said, hypothetically. "Oh, no," Rachel said. "It's never good when someone starts with hypothetically." I told her everything. The motel room, the evidence I'd gathered, the decision I'd made. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then, "First, I'm sorry. Second, you're handling this exactly right. Document everything. Don't tip your hand. And Claire, get your ducks in a row financially. Check joint accounts. Make sure he can't drain them before you file." "File?" "For consideration. You're going to need a good lawyer. I can't represent you. Conflict of interest. I've met Jake socially, but I know people who can." "I haven't decided about that yet." "Claire, he's cheating on you with a coworker, spending marital assets on his affair, and lying to your daughter. What exactly are you undecided about?" She was right. I knew she was right. But saying it out loud made it real in a way that all my midnight documentation hadn't. "I need to think about Emma," I said, "about what's best for her." What's best for Emma is honesty. Kids know when something's wrong. They just don't know what. That's worse than the truth. After we hung up, I checked our joint checking account. Jake had withdrawn $5,000 2 days ago. Cash withdrawal, no explanation. I opened a separate account that afternoon, transferred half of our savings into it, my half, legally speaking, gathered Emma's important documents, started thinking about exit strategies and custody arrangements, and dividing up a decade of shared life. This was happening, really happening. Nicole called a week later to discuss wedding details. She wanted to know if Emma would be a flower girl, if we'd confirmed our hotel rooms, if Jake had ordered his tuxedo yet. "Everything's handled," I said, which was neither true nor false, but successfully non-committal. "Is Jake there? I need to talk to him about the rehearsal dinner." "He's at work." "At 8 o'clock on a Saturday." I looked at Jake's location on my phone, the office parking lot, or rather, the lot adjacent to the office, where Hannah's Lexus was probably parked. "Big project," I said. "You know how it is." "I really don't," Nicole said with that particular tone she reserved for me, the one that suggested I didn't quite understand how professional success worked because I'd chosen to work from home and be available for my child. "But that's Jake, always going above and beyond. It's the Patterson work ethic. The Patterson work ethic, otherwise known as abandoning your family while pretending to be noble about it." Actually, Nicole, there's something I need to tell you. The words came out before I'd planned them. Rachel's advice echoed in my head. Don't tip your hand. But suddenly I was so tired of performing, of pretending everything was fine, while my marriage dissolved in real time. Jake and I are having problems, I said. Silence on the other end. Then, what kind of problems? The kind where he's having an affair with his co-worker and spending our money on hotel rooms. More silence. I could practically hear Nicole's mind working, trying to figure out how to spin this into something that wasn't Jake's fault. That's a serious accusation, Claire. It's a serious situation. Have you considered that maybe you're misinterpreting things? Jake would never... you must be mistaken. There it was, the instinctive defense of her brother, regardless of evidence or reality. I'm not mistaken. I have phone records, credit card statements, location data. I know exactly what's happening. Then maybe you should ask yourself why. What drove him to this? Marriage is a two-way street, Claire. The implication was clear. Whatever Jake had done, I must have somehow caused it, by being insufficiently attentive or attractive or supportive, by working from home, by focusing on our daughter, by existing in ways that disappointed the Patterson family standards. I'm calling to give you a heads up, I said, keeping my voice level, because in about 2 weeks I'm filing for a legal separation. I wanted you to know before the family grapevine started spinning stories. 2 weeks? That's... Claire, don't be rash. Think about Emma. Think about your family. You can work through this. Get counseling. Don't throw away 10 years over one mistake. One mistake. As if infidelity was a typo, easily corrected. I've thought about Emma constantly. That's why I'm doing this. And Nicole, I'm not throwing anything away. Jake already did that. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. I'd just declared war on the Patterson family, and they were people who knew how to wage war. Money, connections, social standing, all the weapons I didn't have. But I had truth, and I had evidence, and I had a fury so profound it felt like it could power a city. Jake came home that night and asked if I'd talk to his sister. I did, I said. She called me completely hysterical, said you're accusing me of something insane. We were in the kitchen. Emma was upstairs, hopefully wearing headphones and not hearing this. Insane, I repeated. Interesting word choice. Claire, what's going on with you? You've been weird for weeks, cold, distant. Now you're telling my family that we're having problems? Because we are, Jake. Or rather, you are. I'm just finally acknowledging it. He looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand why I might be upset. If something's bothering you, we should talk about it. But ambushing me with my sister isn't fair. The audacity was breathtaking. He was making me the villain in our story. You want to talk? Fine. Let's talk about the Riverside Inn, room 247, Hannah Kendrick, $5,000 in cash withdrawals, jewelry I've never seen, business trips that coincide exactly with her travel schedule. Jake's face went pale, then red, then carefully blank. You've been spying on me. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. You can't just go through my private information without permission. That's a violation of our marriage, because that ship has sailed, Jake. You violated it months ago. I'm just catching up. He sat down heavily at the kitchen table. For a moment I thought he might actually tell the truth, admit what he'd done, maybe even apologize. Instead, he said, Hannah is a colleague, a friend. We've had coffee a few times. Lunch. It's networking, Claire. That's how business works. I'm sorry if you're so isolated working from home that you've forgotten how professional relationships function. The gaslighting was almost impressive in its shamelessness. Coffee and lunch at hotels. We had meetings near those locations. It made sense to grab food there. For hours at a time, with your phone turned off. I didn't realize I needed to clear my schedule with you. I'm not a child, Claire. I'm allowed to have a professional life. Professional? That's what you're calling it. He stood up, running his hands through his hair in that gesture that used to seem endearing and now just looked manipulative. I can't do this right now. I have an early morning. Another meeting with Hannah. A client presentation. But think whatever you want. You clearly already have. He went upstairs. I heard him moving around in Emma's room, probably kissing her goodnight and playing the devoted father role. Then the guest room door closed. I sat alone in the kitchen, shaking with rage and something else, relief, because now it was out in the open. Now we'd stopped pretending. Now the real work could begin. I met with Rachel's recommended lawyer on a Tuesday morning. His name was David Chen, 50-ish, kind eyes, reputation for being thorough and fair, but absolutely ruthless when necessary. Rachel sent me your documentation, he said, reviewing the file I'd prepared. This is impressively organized. Most people come in with vague suspicions and emotional testimony. You've built an actual case. I'm a systems designer. Organization is kind of my thing. He smiled. Lucky for you. Unlucky for your husband. Let's talk about what you want from this proceeding. What did I want? I'd thought about this constantly. Late at night, early in the morning, during work meetings where I smiled and nodded while my brain churned through scenarios. Primary custody of Emma, I said. Fair division of assets. And I want him to understand that there are consequences for his choices. The last part isn't really legal territory, David said gently. That's emotional. The court cares about property, custody, support, not punishment. I know, but I need him to know that he doesn't get to do this without repercussions, that he can't just blow up our family and walk away like nothing happened. David studied me for a moment. You're angry. Extremely. That's understandable, but we need to channel that anger into strategic action, not revenge. Revenge feels good temporarily, but usually backfires. Strategy gets you what you actually need. He was right, of course. Professionals are usually right about these things. But he didn't understand that sometimes strategy and revenge could be the same thing if you planned carefully enough. What about the affair? I asked. Does that matter legally? Illinois is a no-fault state, so infidelity doesn't directly impact whether you can get a legal dissolution. But it can be relevant for custody, showing poor judgment, spending marital assets on the affair, that kind of thing. And it definitely matters in the court of public opinion. Public opinion. That was interesting. Tell me more about that. David leaned back in his chair. Well, technically it's not relevant to the legal case, but people talk. Word gets around. Your husband works in marketing, right? For a company that values its reputation. These things have a way of becoming known. Known how? I'm not suggesting you do anything inappropriate, but you can't control what other people notice or say. If co-workers become aware of the situation, if clients hear about it, if his professional community starts asking questions, that's not your responsibility to prevent. I understood what he was carefully not saying. There were ways to ensure Jake's choices became public knowledge, ways to make sure his affair had professional consequences, not just personal ones. Of course, I said, I would never do anything inappropriate. Of course not, David agreed, his expression carefully neutral. We spent the next hour discussing custody arrangements, property division, timelines. David would file the papers in 2 weeks. Jake would be served at work. More public that way, harder for him to control the narrative. One more thing, I said as I was leaving. His sister Nicole is getting married in 2 months. Jake is the best man. I'm supposed to be there as his wife, smiling for photos, pretending everything's perfect. Are you asking if you should go? I'm asking if there's any strategic value in being there. David considered this. That depends. Do you want to confront him publicly, make a statement, or would you rather skip it and avoid the drama? I'm not sure yet, but I'll let you know. I left his office feeling oddly energized. I had a plan now, a lawyer, a strategy. The machinery was in motion, and once it started moving, there would be no stopping it. Emma asked that night if we were getting a second home. What makes you think that, sweetie? Because Daddy keeps saying he needs to find an apartment. I heard him on the phone. My chest tightened. Jake was already planning his exit, lining up his next chapter with Hannah while still living in our house, still playing family man when convenient. Daddy and I are figuring some things out, I said carefully. Sometimes grown-ups need space to think. Are you getting separated, like Mia's parents? Mia was Emma's best friend. Her parents had recently gone through a very public, very messy split that involved police visits and restraining orders. It's not like that, I said. But yes, Daddy and I might live separately for a while. Is it because of me? My heart cracked. No, baby, no. This has nothing to do with you. You are perfect and wonderful and loved so much. This is about grown-up stuff that has nothing to do with you. She looked unconvinced. 7-year-olds are remarkably perceptive about parental lies. Does Daddy still love us? How do you answer that? How do you tell your daughter that her father loves her absolutely, but has chosen to prioritize his own desires over family stability? That love doesn't always look like what we think it should. Daddy loves you more than anything, I said, which was probably true. And he loves me in his way. But sometimes people change. They want different things, and that's okay. It doesn't feel okay. I know, sweetheart, I know. I held her while she cried, this small person who hadn't asked to be caught in the middle of adult failures. I promised her that everything would be all right, that she'd always have 2 parents who loved her, that this wasn't the end of anything important, more lies, or maybe hopes. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Nicole's wedding arrived like a deadline I couldn't extend. Jake had been served the papers 3 days earlier. His lawyer had called mine. The machinery of legal separation was grinding forward. But the wedding was already planned, already paid for, and Nicole had made it clear, through multiple hostile phone calls, that my absence would be seen as vindictive and petty. Never mind that her brother had destroyed our marriage. Family loyalty, apparently, only ran in one direction. So I went. Emma was excited about her flower girl dress, and I wasn't going to punish her for adult problems. The wedding was exactly what you'd expect from Claire Patterson. Expensive, tasteful, designed to impress. A waterfront venue, elegant decorations, 200 guests who all seemed to know each other from various country clubs and professional networks. I arrived with Emma, wearing a dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion. Not flashy, not attention-seeking, but expensive enough to signal that I wasn't broken by recent events. Navy blue, perfectly tailored, paired with shoes that cost more than I usually spent on a month of groceries. If I was going to walk into enemy territory, I'd do it looking like someone who couldn't be intimidated. Jake was already there, standing with the groomsmen. He saw me and his face went carefully blank. We'd barely spoken since the papers were served. He'd moved into an apartment downtown, conveniently close to Hannah's place, according to my periodic location checks. Nicole intercepted me at the entrance to the venue. She looked beautiful and terrifying in her wedding dress, like a very angry swan. "You actually came," she said. "Emma's the flower girl. Of course I came. We need to keep this civil, for the family. Can you manage that?" The implication that I was the problem, the source of drama, was rich. "I'm always civil, Nicole. I'm not the one who hired a lawyer first. Because you ambushed my brother with papers at his workplace. That was cruel, Claire. What's cruel is conducting an affair while your wife takes care of your child and your household. But I guess we have different definitions." Nicole's jaw tightened. "Today is about me, not about your marriage problems. Can you please not make a scene?" "I'm not the one who makes scenes." That was true. I didn't make scenes. I made plans. The ceremony was beautiful. Emma performed her flower girl duties perfectly, scattering petals down the aisle with serious concentration. I sat in the back, watching Jake stand beside Nicole as she married a man I'd met exactly twice. During the vows, I wondered if Nicole had any idea what she was signing up for. Marriage as a legal partnership, as an economic unit, as a hostage situation where your happiness depended on someone else's choices. Did she understand that this beautiful ceremony was just the beginning of a long negotiation that could end in lawyers' offices and custody schedules? Probably not. Nobody thinks about that on their wedding day. I certainly hadn't. The reception was in a grand ballroom overlooking the water. I sat at a table with distant relatives who made awkward small talk while carefully not mentioning the elephant in the room. Everyone knew. The whole family knew. And everyone had apparently decided that Jake was the victim of my unreasonable reaction to his very understandable need for connection with a coworker. I smiled and made conversation and drank exactly 1 glass of champagne because I needed to stay sharp. Hannah wasn't there. Jake wasn't quite that bold, but I could feel her presence like a ghost at the feast. Every time Jake checked his phone, every time he smiled at some private text, I knew. Halfway through dinner, Emma came running over. "Mommy, can I go play with the other kids outside?" "Stay where I can see you, okay?" "I will." She raced off with the Flower Girl gang, and I was left alone at my table. The distant relatives had migrated to the bar. I pulled out my phone and opened the shared album I'd discovered last week, Jake's Google Photos automatically backing up to the cloud, including every photo from his private moments with Hannah. Dinners, trips, intimate moments he'd thought were secure. I hadn't decided yet what to do with these photos. The lawyer said they were admissible as evidence. Rachel said using them publicly would be seen as vindictive. My own conscience said revenge was beneath me. But sitting at that wedding, watching Jake laugh with his friends while our daughter played outside, watching Nicole bask in attention while treating me like a pariah, something inside me shifted. Sometimes being the bigger person just meant letting people walk all over you. I stood up and walked to the bar, ordered a second glass of champagne. Then I approached the wedding photographer. "Excuse me," I said. "I wanted to make sure you got some good shots of the best man. He's been so important to Nicole." "Of course. I've got several. Would you like to see?" "That's okay. I was actually wondering, do you do other events? Corporate things, family portraits?" We chatted for a few minutes. I learned that she freelanced, had a wide network of other photographers, and yes, she'd be happy to connect me with colleagues who specialized in different types of photography. "What kind of event are you planning?" she asked. "Oh, just thinking ahead. You never know when you might need documentation of important moments." I walked away before she could ask more questions. Jake cornered me near the dessert table. "What are you doing here, Claire?" "Supporting your sister on her wedding day, just like you asked me 2 months ago. That was before you filed for separation. I'm not sure what that has to do with Emma being a flower girl, unless you think children should be punished for their parents' decisions." He exhaled sharply. "Don't do that. Don't make this about Emma when you're clearly here to, I don't know, make some kind of point." "What point would that be?" "That you're not backing down, that you're going to make this as difficult as possible, that you want everyone to see you as the victim." I sipped my champagne. "I don't need to position myself as anything, Jake. The facts speak for themselves. Those facts are your interpretation, your paranoia. Hannah and I are colleagues who became friends. If you can't handle that, I can handle a lot. I handled a decade of marriage. I handled being left at our daughter's recital. I handled motel rooms and secret credit cards. I can certainly handle standing in this ballroom drinking champagne. You're enjoying this? Am I? Yes. You love being the wronged wife, the victim. It gives you permission to be vindictive." That stung because it had a grain of truth. I did feel a certain satisfaction in watching him squirm, in knowing that for once I held the power in our dynamic. "I'm not being vindictive," I said. "I'm being strategic. There's a difference." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm thinking very carefully about my next moves, about what's best for Emma, for my future, for everyone involved. It means I'm not acting impulsively." He studied my face, trying to figure out what I was planning. Claire, we can still work this out. We don't have to blow up our entire lives. Emma needs both of us, together. Emma needs parents who are honest and respectful. That's not us. Not anymore. Because you won't let it be. The urge to throw my champagne in his face was almost overwhelming. But I didn't, because that would be a scene. That would be emotional and messy and exactly what he expected. Instead, I smiled. Enjoy the rest of the wedding, Jake. I think I'll go check on Emma. I walked away, feeling his eyes on my back. The photos appeared online 3 weeks after the wedding. Not from me. I want to be clear about that. I didn't post them, didn't send them to anyone, didn't violate any privacy agreements or laws. But somehow, through means I definitely didn't orchestrate, they found their way to Jake's company message board. The internal system where employees shared updates, celebrated promotions, posted about company events. Someone created an anonymous account. Someone uploaded an album titled Executive Integrity, a Case Study. Someone attached every photo I'd found in Jake's cloud storage, along with timestamps and location data that showed exactly when these intimate moments had occurred. During business hours, on business trips, in locations that contradicted official travel reports. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Jake called me screaming. You posted my private photos. You violated my privacy. This is illegal. I didn't post anything, I said calmly. I wouldn't even know how to access your company's internal system. Don't lie to me. Who else would? Jake, you shared your location with me. Your photos backed up to a shared cloud. You used joint credit cards. Nothing I accessed was private, and I didn't share any of it publicly. If someone else found the same information and drew their own conclusions, that's not my responsibility. You're going to pay for this. My lawyer says this is harassment. Your lawyer can discuss it with my lawyer. I need to go. Emma has homework. I hung up. The truth was more complicated. I had shared information with exactly one person, Rachel, my attorney friend, in the context of asking legal advice about what constituted admissible evidence. Rachel had mentioned it casually to someone who happened to work in Jake's industry. That person had mentioned it to someone else. Word spread the way word always spreads in professional networks. I hadn't posted anything. I'd simply failed to prevent the inevitable. Hannah was fired within a week. Not for the affair. Companies couldn't officially terminate people for that. But for misuse of company resources and inappropriate conduct during business travel. The HR investigation found that she'd charged personal expenses to her company card, taken unapproved trips, and created a hostile work environment. All true, all documented, all discoverable once someone started looking. Jake wasn't fired, but he was demoted. Moved from senior account manager back to regular account manager. Reassigned to smaller clients. His office became a cubicle. The financial implications were significant. Lower salary, no bonus structure, fewer benefits, which meant his child support and eventual property settlement would be calculated from a much smaller base. I felt bad about that for approximately 3 minutes. Nicole called me from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. You destroyed my brother's career, she said. Are you happy now? I didn't destroy anything. Jake made his own choices. I just stopped covering for them. You leaked those photos. Don't pretend you didn't. I didn't leak anything. Other people drew conclusions from information that was never properly secured. That's not my fault. You're vindictive and cruel. This isn't about protecting Emma. This is about revenge. Maybe. Or maybe it's about consequences. People need to understand that their actions matter, that they can't just do whatever they want and expect everyone else to clean up the mess. You've made an enemy of this family, Claire. We have resources. We have connections. We can make your life very difficult. You're welcome to try, I said. But Nicole, I've spent 10 years being intimidated by the Patterson family mystique. I'm done with that. Your resources don't scare me anymore. You'll regret this. Probably, but not as much as I regret believing that your family had any integrity. I hung up before she could respond. The threatening call should have worried me. The Pattersons did have connections. Nicole's new husband worked in commercial real estate. Jake's father was a retired executive with board positions all over the city. Their cousin was a judge. They had the kind of network that could make professional life difficult if they wanted to. But I had something they didn't. Nothing left to lose. My marriage was over. My reputation in their circles was already destroyed. They'd already decided I was the villain of this story. So why not play the part? Emma's therapist called me in for a conference. I'd started taking her to counseling after the separation, not because she was falling apart, but because I wanted her to have a safe space to process everything. Dr. Weinstein was in her 40s, warm but direct. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Emma's doing well overall, she said. She's resilient, but there are some concerns I wanted to discuss. My stomach dropped. What kind of concerns? She's starting to internalize the conflict between you and Jake. She feels responsible for keeping both of you happy. That's a lot of pressure for a 7-year-old. I've tried so hard not to put her in the middle. I know, and Jake is trying too. But kids are perceptive. They pick up on tension, even when parents think they're hiding it. Emma knows you're angry at her father. She knows he's angry at you. She's trying to be the bridge between you, and it's exhausting her. I felt the guilt wash over me. Everything I was doing, the strategic planning, the careful revelation of Jake's choices, the satisfaction I felt at his professional consequences, all of it was affecting Emma in ways I hadn't fully considered. What should I do differently? First, you and Jake need to establish clear boundaries around communication. No arguing in front of Emma. No using her to pass messages. No subtle digs that she can overhear. Second, you both need to reassure her constantly that she's not responsible for fixing this. Third, and this is important, you need to let go of the anger. That's easier said than done. I know, but holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. It's hurting you more than it's hurting Jake, and it's definitely hurting Emma. She was right. Of course she was right. Professionals were always right about these things. But knowing something intellectually and actually doing it were completely different challenges. I tried. I really did try to let go of the anger. I responded to Jake's texts about custody schedules without sarcasm. I agreed to flexible arrangements when his work schedule changed. I even apologized for the way information about his affair had become public, even though I maintained I hadn't directly caused it. But then I got the notification from my bank. Jake had withdrawn $50,000 from our joint investment account, the one we'd set up for Emma's college fund, the one that was supposed to be untouchable. I called David immediately. Can he do that? Just take money from Emma's college fund? If it's a joint account and both names are on it, technically yes. Though we can argue he violated the automatic temporary restraining order that goes into effect when separation papers are filed. That order prevents either party from disposing of assets. So what do I do? Document it, add it to the case. It'll look terrible in front of a judge, taking money meant for his daughter's education. But Claire, I have to ask, how did you find out about this withdrawal? The notification should have gone to both of you. It did. I saw it in my email. And you checked your email because I always check my email. David sighed. Claire, you're not doing anything illegal, but you're walking a fine line. If Jake's lawyer argues you're surveilling him, monitoring his every move, that could backfire. I'm monitoring accounts that have my name on them. That's not surveillance. In court, maybe. In the court of public opinion, it looks like obsession. Be careful. I met Rachel for coffee that weekend. She looked tired. Her firm was in the middle of a major trial. How are you holding up? She asked. I'm fine. Mostly fine. Emma's struggling a little, but we're working on it. And you? How are you really? I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl. I think I might be turning into someone I don't recognize. What do you mean? I mean, I used to be a person who believed in taking the high road, in being kind even when people hurt you, in assuming the best about others. And now I'm checking bank accounts and location data and feeling satisfied when my ex's career implodes. I don't know if I like who I'm becoming. Rachel was quiet for a moment. You're becoming someone who protects herself. That's not a bad thing. It feels bad sometimes. Claire, Jake had an affair. He spent your money on it. He lied to you, to Emma, to everyone. You're entitled to be angry. You're entitled to want consequences. But where's the line between protecting myself and being vindictive? I don't know, but I trust you to figure it out. You're one of the most thoughtful people I know. If you're questioning yourself, that's probably a good sign. It means you still have a conscience. Sometimes I wish I didn't. No, you don't. That conscience is what makes you you. Don't lose it just because Jake doesn't have one. The custody evaluation happened in month 4 of the separation. A court-appointed psychologist spent hours interviewing me, Jake, and Emma separately. She visited both of our homes, talked to teachers and neighbors and family members. I prepared for it like a job interview, made sure my apartment was clean but lived in, had Emma's artwork on the walls, talked about routines and stability and co-parenting cooperation. Jake apparently took a different approach. According to the psychologist's report, which I received 3 weeks later, he spent most of his interview talking about how I'd sabotaged his career, violated his privacy, and turned his family against him. The report recommended primary custody go to me, with Jake getting alternating weekends and 1 evening per week. It noted that while both parents loved Emma, I demonstrated more consistent involvement in her daily life and better emotional regulation. Jake's lawyer immediately filed an objection, claimed the evaluation was biased, demanded a new evaluator. David told me this was normal. He's grasping at straws. The report is thorough and well documented. No judge is going to overturn it without serious cause. So what happens now? Now we wait for the court date. Probably another 2 months. In the meantime, stick to the temporary custody arrangement and document everything. Document everything. That seemed to be the theme of my new life. Every pickup and drop-off, every text message, every broken promise and late arrival, building a case file that proved what I already knew. Jake loved Emma, but he loved his convenience more. Hannah reached out to me through LinkedIn, a private message that appeared one morning while I was drinking coffee and reviewing wireframes for a client project. I know you probably hate me. I would hate me too. But I think we need to talk. There's something you should know about Jake. I stared at that message for a full 10 minutes. Every instinct said, delete it, block her, move on. Getting involved with the other woman was a recipe for drama. But curiosity won. I messaged back. What could you possibly tell me that I don't already know? Her response came immediately. Can we meet? In person? This isn't something I want to put in writing. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop in a neighborhood where neither of us was likely to run into anyone we knew. Hannah looked different than I remembered. Smaller somehow. Less polished. She was wearing jeans and a plain sweater, no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Thank you for meeting me, she said as I sat down. I'm here. Talk. She took a deep breath. First, I want you to know that I'm not trying to excuse what I did. I made terrible choices. I hurt you and Emma, and I'm sorry for that. Okay. But I need you to understand that Jake lied to both of us. He told me you were already separated, that you'd been living apart for months, that the relationship was over, and you were just waiting to finalize paperwork. I felt something cold settle in my chest. When did he tell you this? Last February, when things started. He said you were staying together for Emma, but that you both had agreed the marriage was finished. He made it sound like a mutual decision. February. That was when the texting had started, according to the phone records, when the first hotel charges appeared. So you thought I knew, I said. You thought I was okay with it. I thought you were both moving on. I thought, God, this sounds so stupid now. I thought we were all adults handling a difficult situation maturely. Did he ever mention that I was still sleeping in our bedroom? That we were still going to family events together? That I had no idea our marriage was over? Hannah's face crumpled. No, he said you had separate bedrooms, that you were basically roommates. When I saw you at the company holiday party, I thought you were being polite for appearances. I didn't realize you didn't know. When did you figure it out? When the separation papers were filed. When Jake completely fell apart and blamed you for everything. When he said you'd blindsided him, that you'd gone crazy and paranoid. None of it matched what he'd told me before, so I started asking questions. What kind of questions? About your marriage, about when things went wrong, about whether you'd really agreed to separate, and every answer made it clear that he'd been lying to me from the start. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt satisfied that even the other woman recognized Jake's dishonesty. Instead, I just felt tired. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because he's doing it again, with someone else, a new colleague. And I thought you should know that this isn't about you or me or whoever comes next. This is who Jake is. He creates narratives that make him look good, and everyone else look unreasonable. And he's very convincing. You could have just walked away. Why risk talking to me? Hannah looked down at her coffee cup. Because I'm worried about Emma. Jake talks about custody like it's a competition he needs to win. Not because he wants to be with her more, but because he wants to prove something. And I thought maybe if you knew he was already moving on to someone else, it might help your case. You'd testify to that? If it helps Emma, yes. I made a lot of mistakes, but I don't want a kid caught in the middle of his ego games. I told David about the meeting. He listened without interrupting, then leaned back in his chair. This is gold, he said. An affair partner willing to testify about his deceptions, his pattern of behavior, his priorities. The judge will take this seriously. You want me to use her testimony? I want to win you custody of your daughter. If Hannah's willing to help, we'd be foolish not to take advantage of it. It feels like I'm sinking to his level. Claire, you're not making anything up. You're not lying. You're simply presenting the truth about who Jake is and what he's likely to do in the future. That's not vindictive. That's smart. But it felt vindictive. It felt like I was assembling an army to destroy someone I'd once loved. Someone who was still Emma's father. Rachel had different advice when I called her that night. Don't use Hannah unless you absolutely have to, she said. It'll look petty, like you're punishing Jake through his ex-girlfriend. Plus, it opens doors you might not want opened. What do you mean? I mean, Jake's lawyer will argue that if Hannah's willing to betray Jake, she might be willing to lie for you. They'll paint her as vindictive or unstable. It could backfire. So what do I do with this information? Keep it in your back pocket. If Jake tries to paint himself as a faithful husband who was driven away by your paranoia, then you bring out Hannah. But don't lead with it. 2 different lawyers, 2 different strategies. I had to choose which approach felt right. The final custody hearing was scheduled for early September. By then, Emma and I had been living in our apartment for 6 months. We had routines. She had her own room, decorated exactly how she wanted. We'd found a new normal. Jake had moved 3 times in the same period. First the apartment downtown, then in with his new girlfriend, not Hannah, someone else entirely. Then another apartment when that relationship imploded after 2 months. The instability was documented in my case file. Emma's therapist noted the disruption. My lawyer emphasized the contrast between my consistency and Jake's chaos. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully, professional but approachable. I wanted to look like someone who had her life together, not someone consumed by bitterness. Emma stayed with my mother. She didn't need to be at the courthouse, didn't need to hear her parents cataloguing each other's failures in front of a judge. Jake arrived with his lawyer and his mother. Elaine glared at me across the courtroom. The Patterson family had closed ranks, convinced I was the villain who'd destroyed their golden boy. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Both sides presented evidence. Character witnesses testified. Financial documents were reviewed. The custody evaluator's report was discussed in exhaustive detail. Jake's lawyer painted me as controlling and vindictive, cited the way his career had suffered after our separation, suggested I'd deliberately sabotaged him out of spite. My lawyer countered with phone records, credit card statements, testimony from Emma's therapist, showed the pattern of prioritizing his affairs over his daughter's events, highlighted the financial instability and relationship chaos. And then, when Jake's lawyer tried to argue that he'd been nothing but faithful and committed until I pushed him away, David pulled out the affidavit, Hannah's testimony, sworn and notarized, detailing the timeline of the affair, describing Jake's lies to both of us, explaining how he'd manipulated situations to appear blameless. Jake's face went white. His lawyer requested a recess. Elaine looked like she'd been slapped. During the break, Jake cornered me in the hallway. "You brought Hannah into this. After everything. You brought Hannah into this," I said quietly, "by lying to both of us, by creating a situation where she felt guilty enough to tell the truth. This is low, Claire, even for you. Even for me. Jake, I've spent a year discovering exactly how low you can go. This doesn't even register. Emma's going to hate you for this. When she's old enough to understand what you did, when she's old enough to understand, I'll show her all of it, every document, every text, every receipt, and I'll let her decide who the villain actually is." He walked away without responding. The judge's ruling came 2 weeks later, primary physical custody to me, with Jake getting alternating weekends and Wednesday dinners. Standard visitation schedule, subject to modification as Emma got older. I'd won. Legally, officially, completely. So why did it feel hollow? Emma cried when I told her. Not because she didn't want to live with me. She'd been living with me for months already. But because the ruling made it real, made it permanent, ended whatever fantasy she'd been holding on to that maybe her parents would reconcile. "It's not fair," she said through tears. "I want both of you together." "I know, baby, but sometimes what we want isn't possible. And that's okay. You'll still see Daddy. You'll still have both of us, just in different ways. But it's not the same." "No, it's not the same. But different can still be good." I wasn't sure I believed that, but I needed her to believe it. One of us should have hope. 6 months after the custody ruling, my life had achieved a strange kind of equilibrium. Emma was thriving in school. I'd taken on new clients at work, rebuilt my professional reputation. Jake and I had established a functional co-parenting relationship that was polite, if not warm. The anger had faded, not disappeared. It was still there, a low hum underneath everything, but it no longer consumed me. I could see Jake at school events without my chest tightening, could discuss schedule changes without feeling the need to score points. Rachel said I was healing. Dr. Weinstein said I was processing. I said I was just tired of fighting. Jake had a new girlfriend, another co-worker, because apparently he was incapable of learning from experience. Emma mentioned her occasionally. Dad's friend Jessica came to the park with us, but I didn't ask questions. What Jake did with his time wasn't my concern anymore. I'd started going on dates, nothing serious, just coffee meetings and dinner conversations with men I met through apps. It felt strange to present myself as a person rather than as someone's wife or someone's mother. to talk about my interests, my work, my life as a complete entity rather than half of a failed partnership. Some of the dates went nowhere. A few led to second or third meetings. One turned into a brief relationship that lasted through spring before fizzling out naturally. I was okay with that. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me or fix me or prove Jake wrong. I was just remembering what it felt like to be seen as myself. Nicole sent me a Christmas card that first year, just a generic family photo with printed greetings, but the fact that she sent it at all felt significant, an acknowledgement that whatever had happened between Jake and me, Emma was still family. I sent one back, Emma and me in front of our Christmas tree, both wearing ridiculous holiday sweaters. No message beyond the printed season's greetings. Small steps towards something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but wasn't active hostility either. Emma asked about the separation on a random Tuesday evening. We were making dinner together, her new favorite activity, and she suddenly said, "Do you still love Daddy?" I considered lying, considered giving her some comforting partial truth about always having love for family, but she deserved honesty. "I love who your daddy was when we first met," I said carefully, "and I love him as your father. But do I love him the way I used to? No, that part is gone." Why did it go away? Because people change. Sometimes they grow together, and sometimes they grow apart. Your dad and I grew apart. Was it because of Hannah? So she knew. Of course she knew. Kids always know more than adults think they do. Hannah was part of it, but it was bigger than just Hannah. It was about trust and honesty and wanting different things. Hannah was a symptom, not the cause. Do you think you'll ever love someone else, like Daddy loves Jessica? Maybe someday, when I'm ready, but right now I'm focusing on loving you and loving myself. That's enough for me. She thought about that while stirring pasta sauce. Then, "I think you're brave, Mom." Brave? Yeah, because you could have stayed sad and angry forever, but you decided to be happy instead. That's brave. I hugged her tight, feeling tears prick at my eyes. 7-year-old wisdom, cutting right to the heart of things. I ran into Hannah at the grocery store a year after the custody hearing. We almost walked past each other, both too focused on our shopping list to notice. Then she stopped. "Claire?" I turned. She looked different again. Happier, maybe. More put together than she'd been at our coffee shop meeting. "Hi, Hannah." Awkward silence. Two women who'd been tangled up in the same man's lies, running into each other in the produce section. "How are you?" she finally asked. "Good. Really good, actually. You?" "Better. I left the company, went back to school, getting my MBA." "That's great." More silence. We should have walked away, should have let this encounter end naturally. But something made me speak. "Thank you," I said, "for the testimony, for being honest even when it was hard." Hannah looked surprised. "I thought you'd hate me forever." "I did hate you, for a while. But then I realized you were just another person Jake lied to. We have that in common." She laughed, a small sound that was almost sad. "The lying. Yeah, that was his superpower." "Was?" Figure of speech. I assume he's still lying, just to other people now. We stood there in the produce section, two women connected by betrayal and truth-telling. "Can I ask you something?" Hannah said. "Do you ever regret how you handled everything? All the documentation and strategy and legal maneuvering?" I thought about that. Sometimes, when I think about Emma reading those documents someday. But mostly, no. I did what I needed to do to protect myself and my daughter. I'm not going to apologize for that. "Good. Don't apologize. Jake counted on you being too nice to fight back. I'm glad you proved him wrong." We parted ways after that, two women who'd shared the same nightmare, now living separate lives and building something better. Jake requested a modification to the custody arrangement 2 years after the initial ruling. He wanted more time with Emma, 50-50 custody instead of my primary arrangement. His lawyer argued he'd stabilized his life, had a steady relationship, a permanent residence, consistent work schedule, that Emma was old enough to benefit from equal time with both parents. David reviewed the request. He has a decent case. He's followed the custody order perfectly. Hasn't missed visits, stayed current on support. The judge might grant it. What do you think I should do? That depends. Do you object because Emma's current schedule works well, or because you don't want Jake to win? Honest question, difficult answer. The truth was, Emma did well with our arrangement. She had stability with me and regular time with Jake. Splitting everything 50-50 would mean more transitions, more disruption. But the other truth was that I did have residual bitterness. Part of me wanted to say no just to deny Jake something he wanted. I talked to Emma about it. She was 9 now, old enough to have an opinion. What do you want? I asked. I don't know. I like living with you, but I miss Daddy sometimes during the week. Would you want to stay at his place more? Maybe, but I don't want to hurt your feelings. And there it was, still trying to manage her parents' emotions, still feeling responsible for keeping everyone happy. You won't hurt my feelings, I lied. I want what's best for you. If spending more time with Daddy is what you want, that's okay. We negotiated a modified arrangement, not quite 50-50, but close. Emma would spend alternating weeks with each of us, with flexibility built in for school events and activities. It meant letting go of primary custody, meant trusting Jake to handle more of Emma's daily life, meant accepting that my time with her would decrease. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever agreed to. 3 years after our separation, Jake and I sat in the auditorium watching Emma perform in her school play. She was 10 now, playing the lead role in a middle school production that was surprisingly good. Jake's girlfriend Jessica sat beside him. I'd brought my date, Michael, a software engineer I'd been seeing for 6 months. We were all being very mature and civilized about the whole blended family situation. During intermission, Jake and I ended up in line together at the concession stand. She's really good, Jake said, gesturing toward the stage. She is. All those piano lessons paid off. You've done a great job with her, Claire. Really. I know I don't say it enough, but you have. I looked at him in surprise. Jake wasn't usually given to compliments or acknowledgements. You've been good with her too, I said, and meant it. Whatever else Jake was, liar, cheat, selfish, he genuinely loved our daughter. I made a lot of mistakes, he said quietly. With you. With us. I know that now. Yeah, you did. Do you think... He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. Do you think Emma will forgive me someday? When she's old enough to understand what happened? I think Emma loves you. That's not conditional on forgiveness. But yes, eventually she'll have questions. And you'll need to be honest with her. The way I wasn't honest with you. The way you weren't honest with anyone. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I never said that properly, but I am. Sorry for the lies, for the cheating, for everything I put you through. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or strategy, but he just looked tired, older, more aware of his own failures. Thank you for saying that, I said. It doesn't change anything, but it matters. Are you happy with Michael? I'm getting there. Are you? With Jessica? Same. Getting there. We stood in awkward silence until the line moved forward. The play ended to enthusiastic applause. Emma took her bows, grinning at the audience. She looked happy, confident, whole. Whatever Jake and I had broken in our marriage, we hadn't broken her. She was thriving despite our failures, building a life that incorporated both of us without being defined by our conflict. After the show, we all went out for ice cream. Me, Michael, Jake, Jessica, and Emma. It felt surreal. Like we were performing normalcy, pretending to be a functional modern family. But maybe that was okay. Maybe performing normalcy was how you eventually achieved it. Fake it until you make it. applied to post-relationship dynamics. Emma sat between me and Jake, chattering about the performance, how she'd almost forgotten her lines in Act 2, how the prop sword had fallen apart during the fight scene, how the whole cast was going to miss each other now that the show was over. Normal 10-year-old concerns. No mention of custody schedules or parental conflicts, or the mess her parents had made of their lives. Just a kid being a kid. That night, after Michael had gone home and Emma was asleep, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine and thought about the past 3 years. The anger that had consumed me felt distant now. I could remember the intensity of it, the satisfaction I'd felt at Jake's professional downfall, the careful documentation of his failures, the strategic deployment of information. But I couldn't quite reconnect with those feelings. Somewhere along the way, I'd let go. Not forgiven, exactly, but released, stopped holding on to the rage because it was exhausting to carry. Jake would always be Emma's father. We'd always have to interact, coordinate, navigate shared responsibilities. Holding on to hatred would only make that harder. I thought about what Emma had said years ago, that I'd chosen to be happy instead of staying angry. At the time, it hadn't felt like a choice. It had felt like survival. But maybe survival and choice were the same thing when you got down to it. I'm breaking my own rule here by including this section. But some things need to be said, even if they don't fit the narrative structure. This isn't a story about revenge, though it contained revenge. It isn't a story about justice, though justice was served. It isn't even really a story about marriage, or infidelity, or custody battles. It's a story about becoming someone new, about discovering that the person you thought you were, trusting, accommodating, eager to please, was actually capable of being strategic and ruthless when necessary. About learning that protecting yourself isn't the same as being cruel. I don't know if I'm the hero of this story. Some days I think I am, the wronged wife who fought back and rebuilt her life. Other days I wonder if I crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed, if my careful documentation and strategic revelations made me just as manipulative as Jake. Maybe there are no heroes. Maybe there are just people making choices in difficult circumstances, trying to do the best they can with incomplete information and complicated emotions. Emma is 12 now. Next year she'll be a teenager, and eventually she'll start asking harder questions about why her parents aren't together. When that happens, I'll show her everything. The documents, the timeline, the evidence I so carefully gathered. I'll let her draw her own conclusions. I hope she learns that it's okay to fight for yourself. That documentation isn't paranoia, it's preparation. That strategic thinking isn't cold, it's self-preservation. I hope she learns that love doesn't mean tolerating dishonesty. That family doesn't mean accepting disrespect. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to pretend everything's fine. Most of all, I hope she learns that you can survive betrayal and build something good from the wreckage. That endings can be beginnings if you're brave enough to walk away from what isn't working. Jake and I will never be friends. But we're functional co-parents, which is enough. He's become more honest over the years, or at least more aware of his tendency to construct false narratives. Jessica keeps him grounded in ways I never could. As for me, I'm still a UX designer, still building systems that account for human behavior, still thinking in flowcharts and decision trees. But now I also know that some problems can't be solved with better design. Some systems are fundamentally broken and need to be dismantled rather than fixed. That's what I did with my marriage. I didn't try to repair what Jake had destroyed. I documented it, deconstructed it, and built something new from the pieces that remained. I'm proud of that. Not all of it. There are moments I wish I'd handled differently, choices I made from anger rather than strategy. But overall, I'm proud of the person who emerged from that crisis. She's harder than the person who went in, more careful, less quick to trust. But she's also stronger, more certain of her worth, less willing to accept treatment she doesn't deserve. That person, the one I became through betrayal and response, is someone I can live with, someone I can be proud of, someone Emma can look up to. And in the end, that's what matters most. Not revenge, not justice, not winning. Just becoming someone who doesn't need any of those things to feel whole. Emma's 13th birthday party is next weekend. Jake and I are co-hosting. His place for the daytime party, mine for the sleepover portion. We've been planning it together via text for weeks, coordinating decorations and food and activities with remarkable efficiency. Tonight, Emma is at Jake's place for her regular Wednesday dinner. I'm home alone, working on a new client project and enjoying the quiet. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Is this Claire Patterson? Normally I don't respond to unknowns, but something makes me answer. Yes. Who is this? Hannah Kendrick. I'm getting married next month. I wanted to invite you. I stare at that message for a long time. Hannah, the woman who'd been the catalyst for my marriage's end, who'd testified on my behalf, who'd become an unexpected ally in the most unlikely way. Why, I type. Because you're part of my story. A complicated part, but an important one, and I'd like you to be there when I start a new chapter. I think about what Emma said years ago about being brave, about choosing happiness over anger. Send me the details, I respond. I'll be there. And just like that, another piece of the past settles into place, not resolved, not forgotten, but integrated into whatever comes next. Outside my window, the city lights flicker. Somewhere out there, Jake is making dinner for Emma. Hannah is planning her wedding. Michael is probably working late at his office. Jessica is doing whatever Jessica does. All of us spinning in our separate orbits, occasionally intersecting, each trying to build lives that make sense. I finish my wine. Save my work. Check that the door's locked. Tomorrow, Emma will come home with stories about her evening with Jake. We'll talk about her birthday party plans. We'll be normal, and that's enough. That's everything.